Stitchers, and welcome back to part 2 of our Cashmerette Stanton Hoodie sew along with me, Jenny from Jenny Stitches. I'm so glad that so many of you enjoyed the first part of the sew along. As a reminder, we have constructed our front and back bodice pieces, and yes, I have just dripped coffee onto my work. And we have constructed the front pockets for our hoodie. So I'm going to get stuck straight in with attaching the sleeves. If we do get an amount of background noise today, I do apologise. There is some demolition work taking place across the street. And they're making a fair old racket, it's got to be said. I did go and speak to them last night on the way home and asked if it would be okay to not make as much noise in the morning because I had to film a YouTube video, and they looked at me like I had come down from Mars, but at least I tried. Okay, so I'm just marking my front and back notches on my pattern piece, and I'm going to unpin that ready to go in. And get rid of the paper piece now. And pins to one side, and again today I'm probably mostly going to be using clips. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is place my bodice pieces right side up with my armhole exposed like so. Hoping you can see this. So we have the sewing machine. Okay doke, so if I look at my joined pieces here, I have my armhole and I've got a single notch at the front, a single notch at the shoulder and a double notch at the back, and that's what we want to match with our sleeve pieces. So I'm going to find the correct one, and the way I do that is work out where the back is. So right sides together, I'm lining up that back notch on my pattern piece, and that's the first clip that I'm going to pop in place. Then I'm going to find my shoulder notch and stick that one in. And my front single notch there. So once I've got everything lined up along with the notches, I'm then going to clip or pin in, depending on what you're using, the start and the finish, and then I'm going to kind of fill in the gaps in between. Plenty of clips in, I don't mind using plenty, I'd rather it was nice and secure. Through to the end there as well. Couple in. Okie doke. So that's going to leave us now with, if I open that up and show you basically how that's going to go together. You can see where we're inserting our sleeve there. So I'm going to go away and clip the other side, and then we will take it to the machine. Okay, so I've got all of my clips in place, and we can take that to the machine now. And again, as with the rest of the seams that we've sewn so far, this one's going to be 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimetre at a 3mm stitch length. So we can get stuck in. It felt like a lot of clips, got to say. Put that under there. Okay. I was going to say, I can't believe that I spilled coffee on it, but I can believe it. It's a pretty signature move for me. And I know somebody on one of the Friday live videos at one point suggested that I get a lidded cup. Believe you me, I have lidded cups and it is still possible for me to spill. So yeah, I'm just not, I'm not cut out for it. I'm just going to be really careful as we go over sort of seams and intersections of where all those little bodice pieces are. Make sure that everything's Nice and neat underneath. I usually just sort of feel with my fingers, smooth everything out and check there's no lumps and bumps where there shouldn't be. And then I can guide that round. You can, of course, if you're more comfortable, you can, of course, hand tack your sleeve piece in, which I quite often do. Less so with knits. I nearly always would with a woven, but knits are a little bit more forgiving, aren't they? So. Alright then, let's see how that's come out. So that's lovely, and fortunately for me that is free of tucks. So we'll get the other side sewn in and then I can get that onto the overlocker and finish those seam allowances off. Okay, I'm going to get stuck in with overlocking those seams in the same way that we have the others, and the pneumatic drilling has started outside again, so yeah, provides a nice background soundtrack to my sewing machines. All right, looking lovely. Let's get the iron plugged in and we'll give these seams a press. Okay, we're nice and warmed up now. Okie doke, so we're pressing our seam allowances towards the sleeve this time. And I always think when you've had a break from a project, it's a nice opportunity to get the iron on it and give it all a bit of a refresh. Particularly in my case, as this has been folded up. Just get a few of those little wrinkles out. And onto the other side. Again, I like to start with pressing from the wrong side because then I can make sure that I've set my seam, I can never say it, seam allowances in the right direction. Don't think my brain is functioning. Plenty of steam in there. It's quite a tight little curve on the top of that sleeve head. So that's looking a little bit wrinkly. Let's see if we can just get that a bit cleaner. Trouble is, in trying to get into one seam, kind of end up creating wrinkles elsewhere. Okay. Right, so now that we've got our sleeves in, we can go ahead and start joining the side seams, and that's going to be done, as is quite often the case with knits, in one continuous seam from the cuff right down to the hip, which is lovely. It makes it nice and easy to do. And the way that I tend to do this is I will start by matching up my underarm seam, and I will actually use a pin at this point. I like a pin for this just for the accuracy, and I tend to just make sure I wiggle my pin in so that the underarm seams are perfectly aligned. I'm kind of laughing here because I don't know how much of this drilling is coming out on the video, but we'll see. Okie doke. So then I'm going to go ahead now and get everything clipped into place under the arm. The Okay, so a week has passed since I was last trying to film this video. And I'm pleased to report that the demolition works are pretty much complete now and the horrifically loud drilling has stopped. So that means that we can continue on with the sew along. So best laid plans and all that. So I've got a fresh cup of tea, it's a fresh day. Let's get stuck in. Now, before we were rudely interrupted, we were busy pinning together our side seams. So I'm just going to continue on and get them fully pinned up. I'm using clips actually. And I do recall I was explaining to you right about the time that we finished that I was busy matching together the joins in our panels there to make sure that the stitching was all lined up. So using pins just to make sure they're in the right place. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pop my clips all the way down the sleeve. And then we can get that on the machine. Okay, so that is now pins and clips all the way down my side seam and underarm, and I'm now going to take that to the machine and get it sewn down. Again, as with previous seams, we're using that 1 centimetre seam allowance, and it is a 3mm straight stitch. Okay, so I'm going to start at the bottom, just because I want to make sure I've got my seam allowances going the right way. Those curly whirly ends spread out. So now I'm just reaching that point where I've got my pins for the join in the panels, and I'm just going to carefully sew up to them and gently remove them as I go. Just trying not to disturb anything. And the same as we reach the underarm seam. Now you could, of course, hand tack this down if you wanted to be doubly sure. I'm just going to kind of go for it. My scissors, just trim those threads. Alright then, let's see what we've got. Okay, so that looks nice. If I turn that the right way out, I'm hoping that you will be able to see. I've got my panels lined up rather neatly there, and the underarm seam looks good too. So that's great. That means I can go ahead and do the other side, and then again, as with the other seams, I'm going to overlock those edges off. Now I've had a chance to give that a good press, and it's looking a little bit more in shape like an actual hoodie. My iron's been spitting a bit of water there, but never mind. And I had forgotten about where I spilt the coffee. The coffee on my work last week, ever the professional. So yes, we are starting to take shape. Still looking a little bit higgledy-piggledy, but it's coming together. So the next part of the process is to put the cuffs on. And this is hopefully going to be quite transformative. So for the time being, I'm just going to move my work out of the way. And the first part of the process is we've got our cuff pieces here. going to join them, fold them in half to make a sort of long narrow tube, and we're going to be joining along this edge here. That would be right sides together. As I'm using tubular ribbon, which is double-sided, doesn't actually make a difference which side we choose. So I'm just going to pop some clips along that edge. And I think for this part of the process, I'm also going to grab my glasses so I can show you how we get these cuffs joined. So that's one side pinned, and we'll go ahead and pop some clips along the other side. And it's nice that we're finally getting to a part in the process where things are starting to take shape. It's always a good feeling when it starts to look like a something. Let's grab the machine. And I will also grab my glasses. Okie doke, so we're going to be sewing down this edge, and we are going to be using a narrow zigzag stitch. I'm going to use the lightning bolt stitch on this machine, and we are going with the usual 10mm seam allowance. Now I'm going to start a little bit in from the edge, just so that the machine doesn't eat my work down the front plate. This machine seems a little bit prone to doing so. Great. Just trim that. Right, move this one out of the way. We'll sort that one out after. And then we are going to go back to the iron at this point and just press this seam allowance that we've just made open. That means that the bulk of it's going to lie nice and flat. If we press it all to one side, we have quite a lump sort of building up. That being said, if you're using your overlocker and you just want to whiz along it, that's also fine. Okay, so now we have this little narrow tube, and what we're going to do is turn that right side out. Again, I'm just going to give that a little bit of steam just to level everything up, and I'll show you this. So at this point we want to join these, fold it in half basically. So I'm going to push the top through there and make sure that my raw edges there are aligned and that those two seams are aligned, if you can see how that's fitting together. Now where are my pins? There we go. Okay, that's out of the way so you can see a little more clearly. And I'm going to go ahead and just pop a pin in there to secure that seam line together, she says. Oh dear, it'll be a little bit tough. There we go. So that's in and that's secure. I'm just going to work my way around and make sure that everything's nice and lined up. And what I like to do at this stage, before I pin anything together, is just get that nice and flat. Everything nice and aligned. And get it on the ironing board and give it a bit of a press, just to get that bottom crease sort of finalised. Now you can see that's now looking like a cuff, like these are on my sweater. And then we're going to take our sweater piece and pop that flat. Now then, what I like to do at this point is apply a few clips. So let's get one on the seam line. I know we've got a pin there, but we can move that later. And then if I lie that flat, oh, I think I'm bleeding on it. Dear me, this is professional this morning. I'm going to get one into the other side, and then I can kind of divide it into quarters, just loosely. So once that's together, again, lie it flat. I think I've stabbed myself with that pin. And clips into the other corners. So we've got 4 there divided equally. Now I'm going to take my sleeve at this point where I want to join it to, and again I have my sleeve opening here and the seam, which I'm just checking. I've pressed it to the back, but I want to make sure it's actually going that way, so that's where my seam allowance needs to be. I'll pop a clip on there and do exactly the same thing. My there. I always manage to like spill things, stab myself whilst sewing. Nothing is ever straightforward in my world. Okay, so now I have my cuff and my sleeve piece, and they're ready to match up. So this is how it's gonna go down. Right, our cuff is smaller than our sleeve piece. You can see that when I hold them together there, and the whole point is that we're going to stretch this cuff to fit, and that's going to have the impact of pulling that in. So you can see on my sleeve here I've got that sort of fullness there. So what I'm going to do is slip my cuff over the top of the sleeve piece, and it's not a pretty process. I'm going to find that seam line and roughly align it with the one that we've just done here. So this is where this pin comes back into play for me. I'm going to lay those seam lines together as close as I can. Take another pin, just press that through, chunky at this stage, and make sure there that everything is lined up. So that pin is going through the line of stitching there and through the line of stitching there. I'm going to take that one away at this point and just push that through. So that looks pretty well aligned to me. If I open it back out gently, yeah, I'm kind of happy with where that's going in. Maybe needs a little bit of a wiggle. It's not an overly precise science, it's just a case of adjusting until I'm happy that the seam is meeting the seam. That looks pretty good. See on this one how they're lined up quite nicely. So I'm going to leave that pin there. That's the only pin that I'm going to use. I'm also going to pop a clip on top of it just to keep my seam allowance where I want it to be. Then it's simply a case of just matching and aligning the other pins. So I'm swapping one for another and continuing all the way around. And I just want to make sure that those raw edges definitely aligned and we're not curling it too much, because this stuff is a bit curly. Okay. And that's just going to make sure that the fullness of the sleeve piece is evenly distributed around the cuff there. Okay, so if I straighten that back out, now I've got my 4 pieces all together there, and that means I can then just gently pull that to stretch the cuff on, and just pop another couple of clips into each of the available gaps, and again just making sure that those raw edges are nice and aligned and even. Now again, at this point you can hand tack it down if you feel more confident that way. Personally, I'm just going to take it to the machine. Get on with it. Okay, so we're all clipped in and that looks really neat and nice. Let's get that on the machine now. Okay, so again, at this point we're going to be using a zigzag stitch because this area is going to come under quite a lot of strain and stretching, so a straight stitch really wouldn't be adequate. And what I like to do here is just start behind the seam there. Just make sure I've got my seam allowance going where I want it to be. Now we can't fit the cuff around the free arm of the machine, so the best way I find is to kind of open it out and lay it flat like that. And the hardest part of this process is getting it onto the machine, and once it's on, we're kind of in place and we can manipulate it to get the needle in and it's secured. And at that point I'm going to take out my first clip, and I'd like to just move it and open it all out like so. And what I'm doing as I work around the cuff here is I'm going to make sure that everything is flat and where it needs to be. So I'm just going to be continually checking that nothing is tucked underneath. I want that sleeve piece to be nice and smooth. So just taking the time, work up to that pin that is holding the seam allowances in place. Take it as close as we can, very carefully. That pin there. And away we go. And just as we come up to those clips, I'm going to remove them. Give it some beans in between. Don't actually need to take the free arm off to do this, but I just find it gives me a little bit more elbow room. And I'm just continually checking with my fingers that nothing is lumpy and bumpy. I haven't caught anything underneath. Be a bit fiddly if this is your first time doing this. You are essentially just sewing a small tube, so it's not the easiest. Don't beat yourself up if it doesn't quite go right. And if it is your first time, it might be advisable to do a little bit of machine tacking even, just to make sure you get it in without tucks to begin with. Okay, so let's just trim those edges, and if I flip that out, oh, yes. Okay, if you look at that there, you can see that our sleeve seam and the cuff seam are aligning beautifully. And we have our cuff inserted with 0 tucks, so I am happy with that. The next part of this process, I am going to go ahead and do the other side, and then I'm going to overlock those seam allowances off. Just to finish them, well, I say off, just overlock them to make sure that they're neatened, and then we will have our cuffs joined, and hopefully I won't cut myself anymore or get any more blood or coffee or anything all over my work. Right, to overlock around the cuffs, I want everything inside out, so wrong side's facing out and the cuff tucked inside, so I've got that nice raw edge sitting outwards. And I'm going to take it to the overlocker and just starting near that back seam, get it underneath and carefully work my way around, making sure I'm not catching any of the body of the sleeve underneath. Okay, so that's really neatly finished, and let's do the other side. So that's 2 cuffs finished off, and we can now turn that right side out, and we're going to be looking lovely and neat and tidy. That's the a little wrestle with it, get it the right way out. Okie doke, so that is cuffs attached, and now we are ready to move on to our hood. I'm on to a cup of coffee now. It is only 10:30 in the morning, so I need my coffee. Right, onto the hood. So we've got our hood pieces cut out. I have been around and clipped my notches, and I've made a marking for the entrance for the drawstring. Now then, there's two options with this pattern. You can insert eyelets at this point if you would like that sort of metallic finish, or you can create a buttonhole. Within the kits I didn't include eyelets because basically when you purchase eyelets they come in a pack like this with a lot of them in, and they're quite expensive, and I didn't want to increase the kit cost unnecessarily. So I've left them out as an optional extra. You might have some at home. So you can just make a buttonhole here for your cord to exit. I'm actually going to put the eyelets in because I do have an open pack. And I'm going to be using the Prim Vario Creative tool to make my holes and insert the eyelets as well. So what we want to do at this stage is to interface those holes, and I have two 1-inch pieces of interfacing cut. And I have also got two tiny little squares, 1-inch squares of denim. Now, you might think, why on earth have you got some denim? I really need to reinforce where that grommet is going. The issue that we have with a stretch fabric and putting the eyelet in is we can get it in nicely, but once you start moving and wearing the garment, they can pop out of a knit. So the best thing to do is to pop something nice and sturdy and woven behind it, to give it that kind of purchase that it needs to really grip on. I have made this mistake in the past when making a pair of joggers. The eyelets popped out. I had to recut the waistband and redo the eyelets. It was really frustrating. And then I made this hoodie the other week and entirely forgot that lesson, and one of those has popped out. So this time we are learning from our mistakes. Okay. So I'm going to take the iron here and just iron on my interfacing. I've made a dot where the eyelets are going in. So from the wrong side, I'm just going to pop my little patch of interfacing over the top of it there. Interfacing just isn't enough on its own. Do the same on the other side, on the other piece. Bit of a rainy morning here, it's got to be said. Not the greatest. Not the best. There it is. I can hardly see that marking. Okay. There we go. Just press that on. Oops. Sort of crumpled a little bit there. I'll press that from the right side. Okay, now I've got that interfacing on, I'm going to take my Prim tool, and this is really good for making holes. So the actual tool itself comes with like a little piercing tool set, and I'm going with the smallest one, which is 2.5mm, and I don't want to make that hole too big, despite my eyelets being 5mm. Just because I want to make sure that, again, that it doesn't pop out. So I will just do a little test hole on my denim here. Centre there. Press that down, and you don't even have to do it hard. You can see how we've got a lovely little perfect circle. Do the same on the other side. The hardest part is getting it lined up. There we go. So that's the hole made into the two pieces, and I'm going to do that now with my little dot here that I've marked. I'm just going to gently line that up. Beautiful, you can see that there. And again, on this side, and this is where the fun begins. So we've got to get the eyelets in. Okay, let's take that piercing tool out. I'm just going to use a pin to pop out those little bits we've just cut there. There we go. And pop those back in the box. Right, and onto the eyelets. So for each of the eyelets there are 2 sides. And let's just assemble all the pieces that we need. You don't need to use the creative tool to do this. If you do purchase a pack of eyelets, they do come with a little tool inside and a little block and a little piercing piece that you can do it all with a hammer. But I have the tools to one side. Oh, there's a clip in there. So I am going to use it. Why not? Right, I'm just going to quickly show you in terms of the pieces that we need to do this. So we've got our eyelet piece here and the back for it. So this is the part that we want right sides up. And what we need to do now is kind of create a little bit of a sandwich. So we're going to pop the eyelet piece through the hole that we've just made very gently there. And then take our little scrap of denim, have that over the top. Because we've cut that hole a little bit smaller, it might take a bit of wiggling, but it's well worth it. This is going to be inside our hood lining anyway, we're not going to see this. And then we want to pop the little ring on the top there, so we've made that sandwich there nicely. And take that to the tool and pop it inside. Once we've got that nice and flat on the plate, so the tool has the 2 pieces out of the pack in it. I'm just going to press down. Nice and firm, you can feel that go. And there we go from the right side. I've got that eyelet in and it's not going anywhere because it's nicely gripped in by the denim. Okay, and we will go along and do the second one. Okay, just make our little sandwich. I'm so frustrated with myself that I forgot to put the piece of woven in last time. I could have kicked myself. I did jokingly say to the ladies on my evening t-shirt class that I could write a book called Sewing Mistakes I Have Made and Will Make Again. Because I appear incapable of learning from my own mistakes sometimes. There we go. So that's 2 beautifully inserted eyelets. And we can move on to the rest of the hood now. Okay, so we now have our 2 front hood pieces, and we want to now join in the centre part of the hood, which is going to run over the back like that. I've just got a couple of notches to snip on this piece. And then we can get that put together. 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Okay. I don't feel at this stage that it's overly obvious which way up this piece goes off the instructions, so the notched end is the end that we want down at the bottom at the neckline seam, because that's going to essentially be our centre back, because you'll notice that that notch isn't even. So that's the one that we want there. We can match that notch on the hood. And then at the top of the hood with our clips. A few more clips onto that curve. This is going to be fun because this is where things really do start to take a bit of shape. That's all matched up nice and evenly there. So that's one side clipped in, and I'm going to clip the other side in whilst I'm here. Or am I? No, let's sew that one down first and then we'll come back. I think too many clips on the go is going to get things confused. So I'm going back to my straight stitch at 3mm. Again, this isn't an area that's going to really be taking much stress and stretching, so a straight stitch is going to be fine. And we don't need to overlock this either because it's going to be covered by the hood lining, so those finished seam allowances won't be visible. You do of course have the option to just take this to the overlocker at this point, but we don't need to do that. These threads off, and there we go. So in nice and neatly there, no tucks, and we're gonna, when we press this out, we're gonna use a tailor's ham just to make sure everything's sort of pressing out nicely over that curve because it is quite difficult to do. I'm gonna now pop the other side in exactly the same way. If I can get it the right way up. And then we will take that to the ironing board and press those seams out. Okie doke, we have our two sides of the hood attached now, and I'm just gonna use the iron to press those seams open. And again, in pressing them open, that means that they're gonna lie nice and flat and not be bulky within the hood itself. So using the ham just really helps you get in to the curves. It's not essential. You could use something like a rolled up towel or some scraps of old fabric to do something similar. There are instructions floating about the internet for how to make your own tailor's ham. Not something that I've ever tried, but I've seen a few people do it. I know Crystal from the blog team has made one recently, and she used some lovely scraps of wool. That was my fabric, so that's nice. But yeah, this is a prim tailor's ham, and it does make life easy. They use these on the sewing bee actually, don't they? It's me like a sad little spotter. I look out for all the tools. I'm like, oh, that's prim. They use a lot of prim on the sewing machine, on the sewing bee actually. Okay, let's get that last bit done in there. Just being careful not to burn any fingers. Right, nearly there. Doesn't help when your fabric is a bit roly-poly. It can be a bit tricky. That's looking nice. Flip that out from the right side and just give it a little tickle. You will from that side. That way now. Try and get into it that way. Sometimes it's just not easy. Right, move the iron out the way now. And aren't you looking lovely? That is a hood, if I have ever seen one. And just by way of demonstration, There we go. Okay, let's have a look at the instructions and see what's next. So now that we've got our hood prepared, we need to repeat the process for the hood lining, which I have here, which is the cream cotton jersey, just like our pocket lining was. And again, I'm just going to line up that notch with the neckline seam, or at least align it, if you know what I mean. I'm going to clip that there and clip my notch together. And what I've just done off camera is to re-thread my sewing machine with some cream thread for this step, because if we go ahead and sew it with the blue against this cream lining, it is going to show through, and we don't want those stitches to be visible. It's not the end of the world if they are, but I think just a paler colour at this point is worth the extra few minutes that it takes to thread the machine up, just so we get a nice crisp looking hood. And it doesn't have to be a perfect match for this cream jersey, which is why I haven't put a spool of matching thread for this step in, because it's just not necessary to have an entire spool. Just a bit of white or cream or something equally pale that you've got sitting around in your thread stash will do the job just fine. Oh, that is twice now that the phone has rung during this process. You cannot get a moment's peace in this job, I tell you. Okay, get these final clips in to our curly willy jersey. Rather enjoy sewing hoods, actually. I think it's one of those parts of the process where you really see quite a little visible result quite quickly. All for those quick wins. Okay, that's one side in. Let's get that stitched in using the same stitch as we used for the main hood, which is the 3mm. And hopefully I've wound up my bobbin okay. And again, we're just pressing those seam allowances open over the hem there. Everything's having a good wobble on this table. The floors are not level in this shop. It's so funny. It's been a lot of things in the past as this unit, so when we came to put the flooring down, it really wasn't ideal, because you know you do need a level surface, don't you? But it's been a restaurant at one point, and this end of the shop was actually a kitchen, I believe. So yeah, the floor probably tell an interesting story. Just once more for a good look in that scene. Okay, let's take the iron out of the way. Okay, so it's now time to join our hood and lining pieces together. Spread out my hood on the table in front of me, right sides up, and with my holes and grommets towards the bottom, and then I'm going to take the lining and pop that on top of it. And I'm going to line up just in the way that we have with all of our other seams, keeping them open. Just going to line up those seam intersections there at the top of the hood. And again, I'm just going to pop my pin through to really anchor where they come together. Concentrate, concentrate. Alright, there you go. And then clip in the centre there. I'm going to take that down to the bottom. So my clips there. Okay, so you can see there, I sort of hold them out for you. We have our lining and our hood on the inside, and we're going to be sewing around this opening. And I'm going to take this back to the machine and swap back to my blue thread at this point. I only wanted that little bit of white thread just to make sure that those entirely white seams didn't have any blue. So we're using our standard seam allowance of 10mm and a 3mm straight stitch again, just to work around these edges. I'm just going to take it nice and slowly and make sure that everything is lined up nice and evenly. Just carefully removing the clips as I go. Alright, so that's everything attached. Let's trim those threads. See what we've got. So when we open this back out now, through that opening at the bottom, I'm going to have some beautifully aligned seams at the top. If I just show you this, see if it makes sense to you. Turn it the right way out. Obviously this needs press. We now have a hood. Now, in order to get our accuracy working around the top of the hood here, we want to be really careful just to make sure that we've got everything nice and even. So what I've done, I've set my seam gauge to 1 inch, and I'm going to go around this little hem that we've just pressed and just ensure that everything is even, because we want all of our stitching to come up in the right spot. It really is worth just taking the extra time to make sure you've got this really neat, because, like I say, we don't want it to go and get messed up. I'm going to use pins now, and I'm going to do it from this side. Just see if that helps me to get things a little bit more even. Right, yes, I am going to defy the pattern instructions and sew it from this side, because I feel that the majority of the time the hood's going to be down. This is going to be the visible side. I want to make sure that this looks as neat as possible. Worth bearing in mind that we should be on a 4mm stitch at this point, because we're back, technically we're back to top stitching. You can do it from whichever side you like. You don't have to take my way as an example, but this is just what I'm finding is working best for me at this moment in time. So I'm going to take that in nice and close to the edge there, just a couple of millimetres away from the seam line that I've sewn. I just want that to be nice and even. I'm going to just set those stitches in place with a little bit of steam, and then I will show you where we're up to. Alright then, so you can see now from the inside that we're looking lovely and neat. None of the stitching is crossing the line because it's exactly where I want it to be. And we have a hood. So to complete our assembly of the hood, we're just going to go into base around the bottom with the machine on a 4.5 to 5mm stitch length. I've got 5 set on here, just to join the hood and the lining pieces together. And that is really just a kind of scant 1/4 of an inch, because we want that within our seam line. Just make sure that's in the right place. Just aligning those raw edges and making sure that everything's sat nice and flush, ready for joining it to the main body of the hoodie. That is when the work will become a hoodie, because it will have a hood. So that's that basted together. Now it is nearly my lunchtime, so I think that is going to conclude part 2 for us today. Next time we're going to come back and join the hood to the main body of the hoodie and finish that off with twill tape. Then we have our zipper to insert and our bands across the bottom. However, that's enough for one day. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you found this useful. Please do let me know what you think in the comments, and I hope that I will be back to you with the 3rd and final instalment very, very soon. Take care and happy sewing. Bye bye.